आप सबका बहुत स्वागत है। ये कहने की ज़रूरत नहीं कि इतनी गर्मी में आप, और इतवार के दिन, अभी ये बात बाहर बार बार लोग कर रहे थे कि जो इतवार के दिन दिल्ली में बाहर निकल आए उसे कुछ न कुछ तमगा तो मिलना ही चाहिए, और वह भी इतनी गर्मी में। तो आप सबका बहुत स्वागत। 16 जून अब हम में से बहुत सारे लोगों को जो इस हॉल में हैं उनको याद रहती है तारीख। वह नीलाभ के रहते रहते जितनी याद नहीं रहती थी, नीलाभ के न रहने के बाद तो ज़रूर ही याद रहती है। और इसलिए कि यह हम सब लोगों के एक दूसरे से मिलने का दिन भी होता है। जब हम सब एक दूसरे से मिलते हैं, नीलाभ नहीं होते हैं सशरीर, लेकिन उनकी याद के साथ। और हरीश धवन अभी बाहर कह रहे थे कि इसमें सुनना जितना महत्वपूर्ण है, और वह तो है ही, उससे ज़्यादा मिलना जुलना है। क्योंकि नीलाभ एक खासे यादबाश और महफिल लगाने वाले आदमी थे कि आप बैठें और इत्मीनान से गपशप करें जिसका कोई मकसद ना हो। ऐसे बेमकसद गपशप बहुत दुर्लभ है, इसका वक्त हमारे पास नहीं होता। जिसका अर्थ ये नहीं है कि आज जो बातचीत होने वाली है वो बेमकसद है, वो बामकसद है। तो यह सिलसिला हमारी तकलीफ की बात थी कि हमें शुरू करना पड़ा 2018 से, जिस साल 24 फरवरी को नीलाभ हमारे बीच से चले गए। उस साल हमने यह तय किया कि हम उनके जन्मदिन के रोज़ एक दूसरे से मिलने का सिलसिला करेंगे, और उस मौके पर हम किसी एक ऐसे मौजू पर बात करेंगे जो नीलाभ की दिलचस्पियों का जो इलाका था उसके भीतर आता है। और ये कहना बहुत मुश्किल है कि नीलाभ की दिलचस्पी का दायरा कहाँ ख़त्म होता है। इसलिए इस व्याख्यान में अगर आप कभी व्यंजनों पर कोई व्याख्यान सुने तो आपको आश्चर्य नहीं होना चाहिए। और हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि ऐसा मौका 2024 के बाद कभी आएगा जब हम व्यंजनों पर बात कर सकेंगे और जेलों पर नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन अभी तो वो मौका नहीं। तो इसलिए नीलाभ की दिलचस्पियों का दायरा बहुत बड़ा था, और उसमें इस ब्रह्मांड में जो कुछ भी है, सूरज आसमान के नीचे और धरती के ऊपर, या जो नहीं दिखता है और जिसका पता हमें नहीं है, वह सब कुछ शामिल था। तो यह हमने तय किया कि हम 16 जून को तो ज़रूर मिलेंगे और इस तरह की बातचीत का एक सिलसिला करेंगे। 2018 को पी साईनाथ पहले व्याख्यान करता थे और उसकी अध्यक्षता निवेदिता मेनन ने की थी। 2019 टी.एम. कृष्णा ने व्याख्यान दिया था और अशोक वाजपेयी ने अध्यक्षता की थी। 2020 में हर्ष मंदिर थे और उसकी अध्यक्षता पामेला फेलिकोज ने की थी। 2021 में आनंद ग्रोवर ने व्याख्यान दिया था और डॉक्टर वंदना प्रसाद ने अध्यक्षता की थी। 2022 को सईद अख्तर मिर्ज़ा ने व्याख्यान दिया और उसकी अध्यक्षता अरुणा रॉय ने की थी। और 2023 को इंदिरा जयसिंह ने व्याख्यान दिया था और परकला प्रभाकर ने उसकी अध्यक्षता की थी। तो आप अगर जनसंख्या के लिहाज से देखें 2024 को मिला लें, जिसमें वृंदा ग्रोवर बात करने जा रही हैं और साईबाबा अध्यक्षता करने जा रहे हैं, आप ये कह सकते हैं कि ये पूरी व्याख्यान श्रृंखला अभी तक वकीलों की तरफ झुकी हुई है। लेकिन ये इत्तेफाक मात्र है, इसमें हमारा कोई इरादा नहीं था। और अगर बाहर जो पुलिस वाले खड़े हैं वो पूछना चाहें कि भाई इस फहरिस्त में वकील ही क्यों ज़्यादा है, तो हमें उनको कहना पड़ेगा कि इसकी वजह हमको नहीं मालूम। तो आप सबका बहुत स्वागत। और व्याख्यान श्रृंखला का जो तरीका है वह यह है कि व्याख्यान होता है और उसके बाद सवाल जवाब का मौका होता है, सवाल सवाल की तरह किए जाएं, इसका अनुरोध होता है। एक प्रति व्याख्यान न दिया जाए व्याख्यानकर्ता के सामने, जिसका प्रलोभन काफ़ी रहता है। कुछ है जो वक्ता ने छोड़ दिया है जिसको जोड़ना बहुत ज़रूरी है, और हम कहते हैं कि आप कृपया आवेदन दे दीजिए, हम अगले व्याख्यानों के लिए आपके प्रस्ताव पर विचार करेंगे। साईं बाबा अध्यक्षता कर रहे हैं, हम दोनों का बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं और आप सबका फिर से हम स्वागत करते हैं। और मैं कविता श्रीवास्तव को यहाँ आमंत्रित करूँगा।
तो दोस्तों, पहले तो आप सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद कि एक बार और हम लोग सब आ जाए इन सॉलिडारिटी ऑफ आवर फ्रेंड्स हियर एंड जस्ट इन सॉलिडारिटी ऑफ ईच अदर. I think we have to reassure ourselves that we are not going to give up on our struggles. We are going to continue to be very hopeful. This mandate is for us. This mandate has been for us to be bold and speak out. 3 months we did it and we saw what happened. We have to continue doing this, and with that hope, I want to begin this session that there will be many more on the stage who are just now incarcerated, whom we'll have, and we will be celebrating their lives also, like today we are here. So I want everybody to stand up and give a standing ovation to our dear friend Dr. Saibaba for having spent 10 years in prison. 10 years, the shameful state fabricated a case, put him inside. They tried to break him. They tried everything which we'll hear in the course of the conversation. This is going to be a different kind of lecture. It's not going to be a lecture, it's going to be conversations. And it's actually, this is what we have to do. We have to do many, many conversations. The answers are not out there or one person knowing it. It's what we all will understand from a situation. So I was very glad that when we approached Vrinda, she said that, well, if you permit me to do it like a conversation in a more democratic way, that is the word she used, then I would like to come. And as it will unfold the evening, you will see what she has planned. So I want to just share a few facts about Saibaba and a few other thoughts. So while we have applauded for Saibaba and his struggle, we don't have to stand up this time, but once again for our dear friend Vasanta and Manjeera. Both of you stand up and a loud clap. Vasanta and Manjeera, without them, I don't think we would have seen this day. Vasanta was not at all familiar with the corridors of Delhi, with the corridors of power, with the corridors of even advocacy circles like ours. I remember the day she came to see me. This was early 80s, and then there was a massacre in 1982, where the entire village was killed, and that changed his life. Of course, he went on to study in the HCU in Hyderabad, the Hyderabad Central University, and then went to the English and Foreign Languages to do his MPhil, and through that path came to Delhi, but was continuously associated. He never joined any organization. For him, the struggle was for OBC reservation, that was prime in Andhra, and he was one of them, which he also brought to Delhi, and was continuously doing that even in the Delhi University. Of course, he got a job. He came to his PhD, and then he got a job in 2003 in Ramlal Anand College, and that is where his entire career started. I asked him, I said, so you were a teacher, you were doing literature, So you get, if you're a student of literature, where do you get the time to do activism? You're supposed to read and write and all that. So, and especially if you're also doing teaching. So he said the activist part of him made him a teacher, and the teacher part of him made him an activist. There was 7 relating to WTO, pricing, water, etc. Of course, Saibaba continued where there were, complete violation of right to life, where there was state repression. These are primary organizing meetings. In 2013, an insignificant case was lodged in Maharashtra by the Maharashtra police in Nagpur, and quietly his name was brought in some 8-9 months later, and he was arrested on the 9th of May 2014. This is 2 weeks before Narendra Modi takes oath in 2014. However, he got bail in 2015, so he came back home. But in 2017, March, he was convicted. And of course, some experiences we will hear about the terrible stories of how, of course, Saibaba doesn't want to talk about himself. He said, I want to talk about the larger conditions of jails. But it will be reflected through his experiences, what he speaks. And we all heard about it also through his letters that Vasanta kept making public, or through the visits that she and the rest of the family made. We also know how he was denied even to be with his mother when she was very ill. In 2022, he was acquitted, but the kind of tyrannical state that we had, where the judiciary also is so easily compromised. The Bombay High Court realized that there was no case, and procedurally there was a great lapse, and all of them had to be acquitted. 6 of them, they all, Pannu Narote passed away in between, had to be acquitted. And of course, as usual, the police promptly came to Supreme Court, and in Supreme Court promptly the stay was granted, and for 9 months they sat on that stay, like we are seeing that of Mahesh Rawat. It's not new. This is the style of the Indian state apparatus to silence you. We are seeing another silencing. We know what's happening with Arundhati. I'll conclude with that. And what we saw was that for 9 months, it sat in the Supreme Court and then sent back to the Bombay High Court that another bench should look at it. And of course, this bench promptly in March 2024 not only decided on the acquittal on the basis of procedural lapses, but also on merits. There was no case. It was an absolute fabrication. It was 10 years of harassment, and he came out. He was released. He came out, and of course, not many public meetings has Saibaba attended. Lastly, when the conviction happened, Delhi University comfortably, dismissed him from his job. He's very young. He still has 7-8 years to go in his service, and they dismissed him from his service. So one of the things that we all have to still be involved is to ensure that the restoration, of course, Nandita and the whole collective of Delhi University teachers who are working on democratic rights are concerned, are working, but it's also our issue that this kind of behavior of the Delhi University cannot happen. So friends, this was about Saibaba, and of course a lot of you know a lot about him and about Vrinda. I said, Vrinda, what do I share about you? I've known Vrinda through my growing up years, we go far back. So I said, Vrinda, what do I tell about you? So she said, and I'm reading out those lines, because she said not a word more. So Vrinda is a lawyer, practicing in the Supreme Court, all of us know, a feminist, a human rights activist. Presently, she is the commissioner on the UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine. And I put a stop here where it comes to Vrinda. And lastly, I think the silencing, they're trying to do some more chilling effects on us. When they arrested Saibaba, when they arrested Sudha Bharadwaj, they try to tell all of us that, this is what can happen to you. And there may be one person arrested, but the impact is over lakhs. A silencing happens. And we saw it through the Delhi riots, the post-Delhi violence. We saw what happened, the silencing of the entire civil society in Delhi. We saw what happened after Bhima Koregaon. We saw the kind of chilling effect. There was complete silencing. Friends, they're trying that of Arundhati Roy. They're trying to silence writers because they know that the kind of freedom of speech and expression that people exercised, saw them not even get a majority, saw them go back to 242. So friends, we have to continue doing our struggle. We cannot have any more silencing, and that is why, that is the politics of incarceration and the unmuting of dissent, which is why we all meet here. Thank you so much. Over to you, Vrinda. Apurvana, would you like to formally call me?
बहुत शुक्रिया। मैं अनुरोध करता हूँ डॉक्टर जी साईबाबा से कि वे आगे की कार्रवाई शुरू करें।
Thank you, Kavita and Apurvana. Thank you very much, Kavita, for your kind and generous words. I have been, since my student days, a simple, common and ground level activist. I remain to be so for the rest of my life. And thank you all of you very much. And today we are here to remember fondly Neelabh Mishra ji. I have been reading even for a long time all his writings. I was following his articles. I also read inside the prison his articles and all that. Suddenly one day, Vasanta came from Mulaqat and told me that Neelabh is no more. I was shocked. It was, not to be thought about or expected such a young person would leave all of us at that time. And after that, Vasanta went back to Delhi, and then she sent me all the people who wrote about him and some of his writings which I could not follow. I was very sad for a long time about him because as an activist, I read his articles since my early days. As I remember him now, one thing that I remember was that as activists we do a lot of fact findings. Since my college days I was part of many fact finding teams on major issues of violations of human rights, civil democratic rights, army actions and all that. Earlier, in late 80s and 90s, no senior journalist in English would pick up a fact-finding report and write an article. But it was, I think, as far as I remember, my experience goes, Neelabh used to pick up the fact-finding reports and write his column or an article. Because most of the fact-finding reports would never come to the mainstream media and print media. And slowly that trend got established. That's how I always remembered him, and he was always very critical of the governments, whichever was in power in those articles. So, as a human rights defender, I followed him, his writings. He wrote about many Adivasi areas, what was happening at that time. He also wrote about northeastern region, Kashmir, and many other issues of importance. He himself was part of the democratic rights organizations, and as a journalist also, he did his duty to strengthen democracy and to see that the people's voices are represented in the mainstream media. So to remember him, there is nothing more that we can do than today to talk about, raise our voices against several things that are happening around us. In the last 10 years, we have seen all this, and what's going to happen to this country in the next 5 years is also, despite some kind of a change, the fears among the people we can see still that, will there be a change? How long the dark times? How long these dark times will continue? These are the things that we have to do. Like in the last 10 years or so, there's kind of a nominal democracy, and then there is a kind of, constitution, everything in place, it looks like. But nothing works. In emergency, there were it was very clear that the constitution was suspended. Parts of the constitution was suspended. But now, it is not suspended. The constitution is not there to function. So, and then no institution functions. It's only nominal. Institutions are there. And, the laws made by the parliament, they are also not functional. Because, the rule of law is not there. If we think all of this, and these are the issues I read when Neelabh wrote about those issues. When I was in jail for a long time, long days and nights, the only way I was getting the news from outside to see some kind of sparks, light, those who stood in the Supreme Court and argued against the grain, against all odds. Sometimes I used to lose hope, but again I used to get quickly back hope. And today I am honored to sit here and speak to you. Certain kinds of sparks of hope that I used to get to survive in the prison, like when a senior lawyer like Vrinda stood up in the court and argued, and several things that she took up, and Prashant Bhushan and others. It was kind of a hope, people are, looking up and see even the ordinary prisoner there, they recognize these faces. They don't know the persons, they don't know what it means. But how, in this kind of a situation, how they are speaking like this is a great, illiterate prisoners when they are talk, I used to get such a, hope. Today, today as we remember Neelabh, I think we should raise our voices for Adivasis of this country, because they are the most targeted people today. I don't think, against the kind of situation we have to raise our voices against this kind of the target, and to finish them off or disperse them off from these areas. It's very important for us. And also, today we have to raise our voices collectively for the people of Palestine. Palestinian people are fighting for all of us, the kind of freedom that we want, the kind of humanity that we want to march forward. Today they represent all our hopes and aspirations, so we should firmly stand up with them and raise our voice. Today we should stand for the Kashmiri people. So our voices for all these people is a very little thing that we can do and bring it to before the international community. This is, very important. And today, Vrinda ji will bring many more voices of the political prisoners who suffered a lot in the last 10 years behind the bars. Mine is not the only voice that is to be brought before here. There are many, and I am very glad that Vrinda ji will bring their voices, and I will also join her to add something with my experiences. And so I was very happy to be here with Vrinda ji, who actually was one of the sparks of hope for me in jail when there was the darkness enveloped, and when people were dying in front of my eyes during COVID periods, hundreds of prisoners, and that kind of a situation perhaps is historically very few moments which I saw that in front of you people are dying. Of course outside also it happened, but inside the prison it was very so tragic, because nobody was there to even take care of a body of a prisoner, and nobody could receive, that kind of a situation. People who spoke, who stood before the centers of power and argued for the people, common people, that was a great hope. And today she is presenting the voices of the political prisoners. And just 1 minute I will say, and then I will not take much time between you and the other voices of political prisoners who suffered along with me. Political incarceration in India is is there since the British Raj and even before. And political incarceration continued after 1947, and today the political incarceration that is surpassed the kind of incarceration that happened during emergency. Because if you count, not just a few cases in front of us, but if you count hundreds of Adivasis who are in jails, it's in fact thousands, for political reasons, because anti-displacement movements. Anti-displacement movement is a solid political reason for the governments to put them behind bars. and Dalits who fought for their self-respect behind bars. There are so many others, minorities, Muslim minorities particularly, and in any prison, they are overrepresented to their population, and it was the same about the Nagpur Central Prison. They are all incarcerated, imprisoned because of, not for anything else, crime or anything, the political reasons. So, all over India, you take any prison, there are political prisoners. But at the same time, we don't have the legal concept of political prisoners in this country, except perhaps in Bengal, West Bengal. So, to bring together the voices of political prisoners is very important, and it is also, synonymous with also the voices that we have to raise for the Adivasis, Kashmiris, Palestinians, and a number of other people who are suffering the most in these times. So I will join you in between whenever I feel I would like to say something. Vrinda ji has an excellent presentation of bringing together a number of voices of political prisoners who suffered, and that is very important for us to listen to those voices today. I invite her to present, and it's very important for us to see in a holistic manner this political incarceration. Thank you, Vrinda ji. Please.
Thank you, Sai. Yesterday, I realized he's 3 years younger to me, but Sai, that G stands for Grover, not for G. So, first of all, thank you to the Neelabh Mishra Memorial Committee, Apurvanand, Kavita Srivastav for giving the opportunity, despite, as you said, already a disproportionate representation of lawyers in this, for this opportunity to address all of you in the memory of our friend Neelabh. Neelabh, a friend, comrade, journalist, activist whose presence and words are acutely missed in the personal and political sphere. Today's talk for me is also a tribute to Father Stan Swami and all others who died while being unjustly incarcerated. And also, this gathering is to express solidarity with human rights defenders, dissenters, journalists, lawyers, student leaders, and activists who are locked behind bars. Those of you who are familiar with the work of Father Stan would know that he was very troubled by the massive incarceration of Adivasis in Jharkhand prisons. And I had occasion to meet him in Ranchi, and we discussed this because along with the Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group, which had done some phenomenal work through RTI, I was doing a study on looking at the criminal justice system in South Chhattisgarh, which is the conflict area. Father Stan then went on to file a PIL in Jharkhand High Court challenging this incarceration of Adivasis. And while we were still engaged in completing the pleadings, he had asked me to come and argue the matter in Ranchi High Court, but before that occasion could arise in court, Stan was picked up by the NIA and taken to Bombay, where he died in Taloja, in the hospital, while being incarcerated in Taloja jail. So we have a Jesuit priest who sought the release of Adivasis from prison, suffered a custodial death due to false implication and criminal negligence by the state. Sai just reminded us to remember not just the icons of the human rights movement, but many others who are incarcerated, as Father Stan was drawing our attention to the same. I did conduct a study, it's published, in Chhattisgarh, and I visited the Jagdalpur Central Jail and the Dantewada district jail. At that time, some names that you would be familiar with, Soni Sodi, Kawasi Hidme, Lingaraj Kodopi, were all in the Jagdalpur Central Jail. Two findings that I think were noteworthy of the study were that in South Chhattisgarh, 3 graphs can be overlaid that show a simultaneous and similar trajectory. The number of memorandum of understandings endorsed for extraction and acquisition, the number of CAPF, the Central Armed Police Force, and other security forces posted in the area, and the Adivasi under trial population in prisons. All 3 soared dramatically between 2000 and 2014. So this continuity is important to remember, and not just the Modi era. The tribal committee, which was constituted almost at the end of the 2014 UPA rule, found that a large number of tribals were languishing in jail for long years. When asked, and I had this conversation with many over there, that what are you charged with? The reply would be Naxal offences. Of course, there is no such offence in any penal code, the old or the new. The phrase Naxal offence is invoked to tag the accused as requiring exceptional treatment within the legal system. This tag allows the police to detain and arrest a large number of local Adivasis. It focuses on the menacing nature of the crime rather than evidence, resulting in greater leeway given to prosecution agencies and thus inordinate delays in trials and lengthy periods of incarceration and little or no accountability. A few days ago, Sunita Pottam, an activist, Adivasi leader in Chhattisgarh, was arrested. Sunita Pottam has filed a public interest litigation which is pending before the Supreme Court of India. It has not had any effective hearing since August 2018. Sunita Pottam and Munni are the petitioners. They have challenged 6 extrajudicial killings in Chhattisgarh. Now Sunita has been arrested and is implicated in over 12 FIRs, many of which have provisions under the UAPA. I draw your attention to this to indicate that the politics of incarceration is not a new phenomenon. In fact, the colonial continuity of the state policy and practice are striking. The law continues to vest in the state and its instrumentalities the power and authority to repress, silence, intimidate, control, and imprison. To weaponize the law to incarcerate is not a practice peculiar to the present Modi regime. And Saibaba is a testament to that. Regardless of regime change, again something that Sai drew our attention to, law has long been deployed to place behind bars persons from vulnerable, marginalized and oppressed groups, persons belonging to the DNT, the denotified communities, whose very identity, lives and livelihood are still stamped by the historical stain of criminality, are found in large numbers. And when we hear the video interviews, Sudha Bharadwaj refers to the Parthis in Baikula jail. Power going rogue is not news. It is in the DNA of power to abuse, misuse and exploit. The more critical question to examine is the institutions that are entrusted in our constitutional scheme with the responsibility of creating checks and balances and holding executive power to account. The answer lies in a close and constant scrutiny of the role of these institutions, and here I would imagine that the law and courts would be critical. By upholding the constitutionality of draconian laws, including AFSPA, TADA, POTA, provisions of PMLA and the UAP, dissent, defy, disagree and dare to dream of a different society. In this incarceration project, I would argue that law is a steadfast accomplice of the state. Professor Shoma Sen, known to many of us here, after 6 years, arrested in June 2018, after 6 years, was granted bail by the Supreme Court, where the court said actually the material that the state is providing does not add up to evidence. At which juncture, the state very casually submits that in any case they no longer require her custody. Even otherwise, the admissibility in law and authenticity in fact of these so-called unsigned, undated letters allegedly recovered from some devices which form the fulcrum of the Bhima Koregaon case has been seriously contested and legally challenged. Whether it is the Bhima Koregaon case of 2018, the Delhi riots 2020, and now NewsClick 2023, the conspiracy theories spun by the investigating agency, whether Special Cell or NIA, grow like a hydra-headed monster, with each charge sheet simply noting at the end that investigation is ongoing. The court is yet to comment on the brazen abuse of the power of further investigation. The incarceration project that the state is pursuing relentlessly, emboldened by the court, aims to mutate the rights-bearing citizen to a subject and transform the argumentative Indian to a mute spectator. Kavita spoke about fear. Fear is real, it is palpable and almost tangible, and it surreptitiously enters our mind and hearts through stray thoughts sometimes. I recall the morning of 3rd October 2023, when the phone rang for many of us very early. It was said earlier that, it is, that there seem to be too many lawyers in this, lining up to give the Neelabh Memorial lecture. I actually believe that more people today have a lawyer on their speed dial rather than a doctor. And that is what is happening in our country. Early morning of 3rd October, when phones rang and at least 40 journalists and activists had the police knocking on their door, many of whom, mentioned even in the FIR, had nothing whatsoever to do with the NewsClick portal, which was being targeted, was to spread the tentacles far and wide. And yes, the chilling effect, at least temporarily, caused many to retreat and be silent. Again, as mentioned and known to all of you, the Delhi Lieutenant Governor has given sanction to a 14-year-old matter for a meeting held in Delhi in 2010. The case was actually not under the UAPA. The reason why UAPA has been brought in is because sections 153A and B, under which the case was and is, there is a period of limitation in law. And that period of limitation has expired. The UAPA provisions, of course, are more draconian, more stringent, and more vague and open-ended to bring in anybody, but also allows the state to jump the hoop of the law of limitation. And therefore, Dr. Sheikh Shaukat Hussain and Arundhati Roy are now, we are told, to be prosecuted for some political positions, statements, remarks made. But it did cause me to pause and wonder whether it is the state which is terrified, fearful and paranoid. The state seems to fear our ideas, our passion, our integrity, our commitment, and our convictions. It is always instructive to look to the north, Kashmir, and to the northeast. Incarceration is a mode of governance. The Matia transit camp in Goalpada, Assam, built at a cost of rupees 46.51 crores, to hold declared foreigners, presently after the implementation of the NRC in Assam, is the largest detention center in the country and presently holds 17 declared foreigners On 14th May 2024, the Supreme Court said that these 17 declared foreigners have been there for more than, out of which 4 have spent more than 2 years. There was an earlier ruling in 2019 that if somebody has been incarcerated for 3 years, you have to let them go. The Guwahati High Court reduced that to 2 years during the period of COVID. Supreme Court on 14th May 24 said, well, there are at least 4 which have spent more than 2 years, so you have to now deport them. So what is the plan? Do you have a treaty? Let us assume that they are Bangladeshis, which is what the state is saying. They are contesting it still. That if these are people who have to be deported, there is actually a very long, formal, legal, bureaucratic process between the two countries. And I would watch this space very carefully to see what really transpires and what is the end game of these detention centers. Another aspect mentioned by Sai again, and an experience that we've heard from friends, that when being admitted into the prison, particularly when you're at the Deori or the small gate through which you enter, I'm talking only about the jails that I have seen, what is taken away is not just your freedom and personal liberty, but all semblance of human dignity. But what you do carry with you is your caste, your religious denomination, the marker of your community. That prejudice and discrimination pierces through the high walls of prison effortlessly. Journalist Sukanya Shanta, who some of you would have read in The Wire, who has written a report called From Segregation to Labor, Manu's Caste Law Governs the Indian Prison System, then went ahead and filed a writ petition in December 2020 in the Supreme Court, which is ongoing. And the court has now taken cognizance of the fact that in the arrangement of the barracks, in the division of manual labor, and in the jail manual itself, for instance, habitual offenders, which DNT persons are then classified as, there is prejudice and remnants of the caste system. I will now, as was mentioned earlier, play some video interviews. The reason for doing it in this manner. One of the reasons, amongst many, to incarcerate human rights activists, lawyers, other human rights defenders is to remove them, remove their voice, remove their work, remove their presence from our midst. It is important for us to hear their voice, to bring them back as a political act into this space, which they deservedly, we need to hear them and they need to be heard. So I, in a very rudimentary way, sitting in my own office using Zoom, etc., no technical skills I can claim, had brief conversations with Fahad Shah from Kashmir, who is the editor of Kashmir Wala, a media portal, Javed Mohammad Pump from Allahabad, who was arrested and whose wife's house was destroyed with the bulldozer, Anand Teltumbde, accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, Arun Ferreira, a lawyer, accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, and Sudha Bharadwaj, a lawyer, trade unionist, accused in the Bhima Koregaon case. This is a very arbitrary, illustrative set of people. This is not representative, and I make no such claim. The reason I was able to reach out to these people is because I have either represented them in court or given them legal advice, and therefore there are many, many others, I'm sure, who need to be heard, but I could only engage with so many in the brief time that I had. So what I'm going to do is play those interviews. They've been edited, of course, and to hear them and to hear from them about the incarceration. Most of them will, some of them may, but most of them will not talk about their cases for obvious reasons. The cases are ongoing. But they will talk about many other issues. We heard from Sai also. You put a human rights activist anywhere, they will observe what is happening. हम किसी और बार शायद व्यंजन की बात करेंगे, मगर जेल के व्यंजन की बात आज ज़रूर सुनेंगे. Health, legal aid, what happens in women's prison, discrimination, custodial violence. Why were they arrested? Some of them wanted to speak about it, others, the cases are ongoing. So I'm going to just play some of those, and Sai has said that wherever he wishes to add, he will add those. We may stop the interviews in between and say a few words. So this is very informal, and as I said, I'm not making any claim to any technical skills, but I'm also taking advantage of the fact that most of the people present here would like to engage with this process. So a little bit of indulgence in that will be required if there's some glitch here or there. जो lights वाले हैं वो lights अगर यहाँ की बंद कर देंगे. So that is Fahad Shah, who's a young Kashmiri journalist, editor of media portal Kashmir Wala. And he will tell us about his cases and why, when he was arrested in 2022, then secured bail, shifted to PS Pulwama, then to Shopian, again granted bail, then arrested again. So of course there is a revolving door where you don't come out, and each time the court grants bail, the arrest is made simultaneously. Then under the Public Safety Act, and finally, when they thought that may not stand legal scrutiny, under UAPA, the case which is still going on, and he was transferred to Jammu, and now we will hear. He was granted bail from the High Court on 17th November 2023. Can we play that, please?
UAPA and arrested on 4 Feb 2022. And my arrest was like in a series of arrests. Like, as you know, that I got a bail in first case after 2 weeks, and I was booked in the fourth case, in the second case, and I got bail in 1 week. Then I was booked in another case, and I was getting bail, and then I was slapped with the Public Safety Act detention. I was sent to jail under that detention, and while I was in prison in North Kashmir for over 2 months, 2 months later, I was booked in another case in Jammu, and then I was shifted to Jammu JIC center first, and then after 3 weeks I was sent to the Jammu jail, central jail in Jammu, Kot Balwal jail, where I spent 1.5 years. And it was very, very challenging. It was very hard to be in a prison in Jammu. Usually, you know, I don't spend much time in Jammu because it's really hot there. The weather is really bad. But now I had to spend time there, and it was in prison, and the prison conditions are not really that, you know, like reformative or whatever can be. It is not a correctional center. It is really like a prison. So while being there, it was difficult. There was a lot of high times, low times, depressing times. There were a lot of times when one would break down alone. There were a lot of times when one would get stung from other people who were incarcerated there, and because those people were the friends, family, colleagues, everything to you while you are there. And I think, you know, like overall, like if I would say why this was done or what was happening is basically that post 2019, there was a particular narrative that was to be highlighted. There was a certain line that had to be taken by the media, because the government did not want anything that would, in a way, as the government says, incites people, or is any voice of dissent would come out. And the situation is such that it is not just the dissent of, you know, like the political or the conflict. Now it has become everything. You can't now even say that the government is not working on health, the government is, administration is failing fixing the roads, or is failing fixing the bridges or the water or electricity. Even those things can attract penal action against you in certain kind of ways, and that has happened. And I think that is the reason that eventually what was done to us, what was done to me in terms of arresting me and then eventually blocking the website that I was running and blocking its social media handles also, which currently also remain blocked, is that it was set as an example that, if you do this, this is what is going to happen to you. This is the example that is being set, that this is what you are going to face. And I think there's like a selective freedom of speech. It is like one way of freedom of speech, that there are certain kind of things that you can say, but there are other kind of things that you can't say. Even if you feel, even if there are people saying something and you want to report that, you can't report that because it will be immediately considered anti-national, or it will be considered terror or something like that. It will be considered that you are inciting people.
देखिए, हम इसमें ये समझते हैं कि ये जो दौर हिंदुस्तान में चल रहा है वो एक सांप्रदायिकता वाला दौर चल रहा है, और इस दौर में कुछ लोग, कुछ गवर्नमेंट्स के लोग इस तरह से काम करना चाहते हैं कि एक वर्ग को खुश करने के लिए दूसरे वर्ग को उस पर जुल्म ज्यादती करके दिखाकर ये बताना चाहते हैं हिंदुस्तान में हम ही हैं जो एक बड़े वर्ग के साथ खड़े हो सकते हैं और उनके लिए कुछ कर सकते हैं। तो ये एक एनिमिटी वाली पॉलिटिक्स चल रही है जिसके तहत हमको फंसाया गया, और उसके बाद उसी दिन रात में 11 बजे हमारी वाइफ को, हमारी बेटी को महिला थाने से पुलिस आई, लेकर चली गई। अब आप सोचिए कि इंसिडेंट में आप हमको ऑलरेडी रोक चुके हैं, डिटेन कर रहे हैं, और फिर हमारी बेटी और वाइफ को ले जाने की क्या जरूरत थी। फिर आगे देखा बयान डीजीपी का लिखा था कि कॉन्स्पिरेटर्स के साथ उसके घर को डिमोलिश किया जाएगा। तो हमें बड़ी हैरानी हुई कि हमको कॉन्स्पिरेटर बना दिया उन्होंने, और हम तो कोई क्रिमिनल एक्टिविटी में कभी नहीं रहे, कभी हमारा कोई मुकदमा उसके पहले आज तक हुआ नहीं। 57 ईयर्स ओल्ड हो गए हम, और आज तक हमने कोई मुकदमा नहीं आया। हमारा मकान कैसे टूट जाएगा। तो हमको लगा कि ये अखबार में बयान आ गया है, लेकिन होगा नहीं ऐसा। फिर हमने 11 बजे वहाँ, आजकल हर जेलों में न्यूज देखने की टीवी होती है, टीवी किसी ने स्टार्ट किया, देखा हमने वहां पर कि साहब मकान डिमोलिशिंग कार्रवाई शुरू कर दिया उन्होंने वहां पर। फिर हमें 2-3 दिन के बाद जब हमारे घर के लोग हमसे मिलने आए किसी तरह से, तो हमको मालूम हुआ कि हमारी वाइफ को, हमारी बेटी को भी 36 घंटा डिटेन किया उन्होंने, इलीगल हैरेस किया वहां पर, और उनको सुबह 9 बजे थाने से छोड़ा, और ये कहकर छोड़ा घर नहीं जाना है। के बाद उनका दिल नहीं भरा, उन्होंने 5 केसेस में हमको जेल भेजा था, और इसमें 20-20, 22-22, 23-23 धाराएं लगाई थी। और फिर 9 दिन हमको इलाहाबाद में रखने के बाद उन्होंने भेज दिया, देवरिया जेल शिफ्ट कर दिया एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव लेवल पर। फिर जब हमारी कार्रवाई शुरू हुई, हमारे लीगल असिस्टेंस जो देने वाले एडवोकेट्स थे हमारे, उन्होंने जब बेल के लिए एप्लीकेशन मूव किया तो उनको लगा साहब कि ये बेल ना करा लें कहीं, तो उन्होंने हमारे ऊपर 1 महीने के बाद NSA लगा दिया। उसके बाद जब हमारे केसेस में अदालतों में सुनवाई शुरू होने लगी, तो इन लोगों को लगा कि कहीं बेल ना करा लें, तो उन्होंने फिर 1 केस बढ़ा दिया, 6 कर दिया। फिर इधर हमारी बेल होती थी, उधर वो केस बढ़ाते थे, 6 के बाद 7 किया, फिर 8 किया, फिर 9 केसेस कर दिए। और आपको ताज्जुब होगा कि जब NSA में हम हाईकोर्ट गए 2.5 महीने के बाद, हमने चैलेंज किया कि हमारे पर NSA गलत लगाया गया है, तो हमारी सुनवाई पहले तो हाई कोर्ट में शुरू नहीं हुई। सब लगा देने से हमारे जो रिलेटिव्स थे, हमारे जो फ्रेंड्स थे, वो सब डरने लगे हमारी फैमिली से मिलने के लिए। आपको मालूम होगा कि जब मकान टूट गया हमारा, तो हम लोग वो सामान सब सड़क पे पड़ा रह गया, कुछ सामान चोरी हो गया, कुछ सामान उसमें दब गया। उस वक्त हमारी फैमिली को कोई किराए का मकान देने को तैयार नहीं हो रहा था। उसी इलाहाबाद शहर में जहाँ हम पले बढ़े और जवान हुए, और तमाम सोशल वैल्यूज पर हमने काम किया उन लोगों के साथ। तो ये जुल्म जाती जो थी, ये तो एक तरीके से बनाई हुई थी, और ये हुकूमत तरफ से हो रही थी साफ तौर से। आपको हैरत होगी कि जब हमारा NSA की सुनवाई कंप्लीट होने लगी और उसमें कोर्ट ने जजमेंट रिजर्व कर लिया, और रिजर्व करने के बाद 2 महीना बचा था 1 साल होने में, उसका जजमेंट ही नहीं दिया, और उसका जजमेंट आज तक नहीं आया। और NSA 1 साल में अपने बाद ऑटोमेटिक खत्म हो जाता है, खत्म हो गया। अब आप सोचिए जब NSA खत्म हो गया, 8 केस में हमारी बेल हो गई कोर्ट से, इलाहाबाद हाई कोर्ट से, तो हमें बाहर आ जाना चाहिए। लेकिन उसके बाद भी इन्होंने हमारे साथ अन्याय किया, और अन्याय ये किया कि गैंगस्टर लगा दिया हमारे ऊपर। आपको हैरत होगी सुनकर कि गैंगस्टर में हमें 3 कोर्ट ने बेल नहीं दिया, और चौथी कोर्ट में चौथी जज ने हमको बेल दिया। अब ये सोचिए कि एक जो गैंगस्टर लगाया था उसी पर एनएसए लगाया, उसी पर 8 केस लगाया। एक अटाला बाबा कितना केस लगाएंगे आप? कि वो चुप कराने की तो कोशिश कर ही रहे हैं कि हमारे खिलाफ कोई बोले ना, हम जो कर रहे हैं वो चलता रहे, जो भी हो रहा है उसको होने दीजिए, जो बोलेगा उसकी जगह जेल है। ये तो उनकी पॉलिसी बन चुकी है हमारे घर के डिमोलिशिंग को लेकर। अब उसमें इतनी जल्दबाजी इन लोगों ने करी कि घर की जांच तक नहीं करी कि घर के पेपर्स किसके नाम से हैं। रात संडे को डिमोलिशिंग किया गया, हमारे मकान को 11 बजे से काम शुरू किया बुलडोज करने के लिए। रात में 11 बजे उन्होंने एक नोटिस हमारे घर पे चिपकाई, जबकि हमारी वाइफ और हमारी बेटी उनके पास थाने में मौजूद थी। उनको थाने में देना चाहिए था नोटिस ले जाकर कि ये नोटिस तोड़ने की दी जा रही है, लेकिन नहीं दी गई और रात में गेट पर चुपके से चोरी से लगाकर चले गए। मकान का पेपर हमारी वाइफ के नाम था, रजिस्ट्री हमारे वाइफ के नाम थी, नगर निगम हाउस टैक्स की रसीदें सब वाइफ के नाम से पेमेंट जमा होता था उसमें। तो उनको अगर मकान तोड़ना था तो कम से कम नोटिस तो सही बनाना चाहिए था वाइफ के नाम से। क्यों हमारे नाम से बनाया नोटिस उन्होंने? और नोटिस दी भी नहीं, और नोटिस देने के लिए टाइम भी नहीं दिया गया। और बाद में कोर्ट में कह रहे हैं, झूठ बोल रहे हैं कोर्ट में कि हमने 15 दिन पहले इनको नोटिस इशू किया था। आपने 15 दिन पहले नोटिस किस बिहाफ पे इशू किया था? डीजीपी आपका उत्तर प्रदेश गवर्नमेंट का कह रहा है कि मकान तोड़ा जाए, कॉन्स्पिरेटर का जिसने कॉन्स्पिरेसी रची है वो सैटरडे को बयान आ रहा है, दे रहे हैं संडे को बयान आ रहा है, और आपने 15 दिन पहले नोटिस इशू कर दी थी। ये साफ साफ मालूम होता है झूठा केस था। और हाईकोर्ट में हम लोग गए मकान तोड़ने के बाद, और उसके बाद हाईकोर्ट में भी मकान तोड़ने के बाद सिर्फ इतना ही हुआ कि इलाहाबाद हाईकोर्ट में एक काउंटर, एक रिज्वाइंडर होने के बाद मैटर रुक गया। आज तक उसमें कोई बहस नहीं हो पाई।
I had a neighbor who was a young boy of something like
इलाहाबाद हाईकोर्ट में एक काउंटर
that time I only respected the way he lived, and during that time I think he had some quarrel etc. And in response to that he was beaten black and blue. when he was brought to the cell, he was just bleeding from everywhere. That kind of thing is very, very common. There was another boy who was a Dalit, and he told me the story that they struggled in the jail, that in, I think, Kalyan Kalyan jail, and to celebrate Ambedkar Jayanti. On that issue, some quarrel happened, and they called the police from outside, and they got them beaten like anything. That he had to be brought on stretcher to Taloja, and that guy was there. So for months together he was canalizing in Taloja, and then I think he stands transferred. So these kinds of things were very common. On the first day itself, when the introduction happens, meaning that the prisoners are actually presented to the jail superintendent. You know, you have to remove shirt and sit there and things like, you know. So mine was first, and with nothing, something like I told my elements, etc., and I was sent out. So I was standing on the road, and I was hearing they were actually beating people with this leather-like belt, you know, with full strength. For nothing. This is the introduction. I was wondering which law permits such kind of thing. What business he has got to beat people? But this is very, very common. And since these instruments actually do exist in the jail, that means they are taken for granted that the people are to be beaten. Now, humiliation is a part of jail life, you know, and it doesn't happen. I mean, with us, it's seen something like a class of people, etc. People are variously treated. But the commoner that I saw, you know, they actually make them absolutely naked, then sit on this thing, then they will make them something like get up and say, whatever it call, I forget now. So that kind of thing. Or anything can happen if you are a common prisoner.
See, I don't know, discrimination of prejudice works at two levels, I could say.
That is Arun
One,
Ferreira.
at the lower level is between the jail staff, the guards and all that. They are prejudiced because of their own, sometimes their own upbringing, and very easily you can talk about the other being as someone who you should not easily interact with. So in that sense, Muslims or Dalits or Adivasi will be part of the routine that type of prejudice or or discrimination. But another type of discrimination is more a political type of discrimination that comes from the higher ups. So if like prisoners like us, or there would be Muslim militants, or there would be even other Muslim sections and all. That's more a political discrimination coming from the higher ups. They would be kept treated separately, easily sent to the under barrack, easily given harsh punishments, things like that. So that we would face, go to that same type of situation. But the earlier discrimination which I talked about is quite common. In fact, Muslims or Dalits or Adivasis or basically minorities would be treated, as the other in that sense.
There are many of these things. Of course, there are a lot of Pardhi women. And Pardhis, I just picked up at the drop of a hat. There is some theft or some crime which is basically, it's not possible to find anybody. So you go to the nearest Pardhi Basti and pick up everybody. So after a time, they have so many cases on them that they get easily called habitual offenders and then so. And there one group which I found even in a relatively more progressive Maharashtra jails, they are still very much discriminated against. They usually have they eat separately, and of course they fight very fiercely, and they have a reputation for fighting very fiercely. But I understand that if they didn't do that, they would be really ill-treated.
See, I had that episode which I had gone through where I had written about Stands For Me. That is after Stands For Me died, and I had written a few pages to my mother about my experience with him. And that was the time when the superintendent was censoring and not allowing any of our letters to go out, especially if they had a tint of political thought or something in them. So I had got a notice from the superintendent, Anand Tirtham, they had got a notice, Ramesh had got a notice, Sudhir got a notice, and for what? For writing a poem, for writing an essay, for things like that. So later we came to know is that when I took up the matter with the Human Rights Commission, in one of the affidavits filed by the superintendent very clearly said that we were doing this because we had to send your letters to the police officers. So they had got an order from the DGP that all our letters should be sent to the police officers, which is in total violation of the jail rules and even client and lawyer relationships or things like that. So, but that used to be done, and letters used to not be sent out. I went further ahead. I took up the matter with the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission felt that this type of censorship is wrong, and they awarded me a compensation also.
And then we had to resist on small things like getting our writing materials or books, etc., to the things like we had to land up in the court, take it to the court, challenge something like letters not being delivered in time, or letters being scanned and being sent to the investigating authorities, etc., which is absolutely illegal. Then there was about letters, there used to be lots of hassles. So one of the letters that I wrote to my wife, I only used to write to my wife, and my daughters are abroad, so my letter had not gone for something like 10 days or so. My wife, I asked the next time she came to jail, so she said that she had not received, and I had sent important papers to lawyer and my friend, and as usual to my daughters. And the letter nobody was talking about. I was following with the jailer, and he was not saying anything. So that was retained. And when I actually wrote a letter to the jail superintendent, then the next day he sent a memo to me, Samaj Patra in Marathi, whatever it means, that there was an objectionable thing with such and such clause and all that kind of thing. Even today, he has written some paper, saying that this is not allowed according to that. It's a Naxal propaganda and this and that. Everything is Naxal propaganda or state security. State security is a holy cow. And to that, everybody actually gives mark.
The second part about getting reading material, actually it's it's a very it depends upon the whims and fancies on the guard at the gate. So sometimes you would get go to court, get some books back, or sometimes our lawyers and comments get some books back. And if the guard at the gate sees that there is some photo of some some red banners, or there would be some communism writings in it where he could only probably read Hindi or Marathi, but if you felt that this is something which he felt objectionable, it would be denied. Or if something was related to our case, which often you would get literature which came out on the net, ask a family to send printouts and all that, that would be denied. So that would be totally there would be no proper reading of what it is. Whether it is even like Vernon recently wrote a article where he mentioned that one time when we were in Nagpur jail, our lawyer had sent a copy of the Constitution of India. So it was a copy with commentaries. So it was quite a bulky volume. So the superintendent at the gate, the guard first said it's too big to carry into the prison. Then the superintendent also said that I cannot allow you to carry this, to bring this in the prison. So we decided to take it up. In fact, on the next round that the superintendent came, we gave him a letter that if you do not allow us a constitution, a copy of the Constitution of India, it's a violation of that special rule which deals to symbols of the flag and symbols of things. So immediately after he heard that, he retreated and he gave it to us. But this is the ridiculousness of the situation.
Now, another issue is the medical thing. The hospitals were not equipped at all. The manual actually speaks of something else, but there was no doctor of that qualification. There were 3 doctors in Taloja jail which were Ayurvedic kind of with degree. But the jail mentions that there should be an MD who is CM, and thereafter there should be assistant doctors to help with the qualification of MBBS, etc. Nothing of that kind. Forget about doctors. There were no orderly, no nurse, no compounder of any nature, and even the equipments were not there. The small equipments is not there, like even the blood pressure or temperature, etc. If it comes out, it would not come for weeks together. So that was the situation. But the projection in the courts by the jail authorities would be that we have a very well-equipped hospital with all this thing. And so we had to expose that. And I think largely it's times exposed because of our pursuit, they sent an MBBS doctor who was CMO. He was also no good. But anyway, that was kind of response from the state. And if you are, as a result of whatever the people fell sick, there would not be appropriate treatment. They may not be paid attention to. Even it happened in my case. I felt I contracted COVID inside, and for 3-4 days I was in such a bad condition that I could have really died. But they did not pay much attention. They were actually sending boys who work for hospital, and those are prisoners, and they would struggle to put the needle in my veins. They would literally wrestle, and that way, whatever medicine, etc., doctor might have advised them, they would put a saline. Fortunately, it worked, and 4 or 5 days. I had to suffer. In that situation, even I was taken to the jailer. Jailer was good that time, and jailer had walked me to the office of superintendent. The superintendent fellow did not feel like visiting my room. Okay, so I barely walked, and the fellow says that no, tumhala COVID nahi jhala hai. He said that no, it is not COVID. I just shouted at him that he was not a doctor and all that kind. And still nothing happened. There was no movement to send me outside because they were trying to suppress that there is anybody suffering with COVID inside the jail. and tried to project that how he is actually managing COVID pandemic. So this was the thing. Rather now the precipitation of it that we have lost stands for me. So it is exactly the same thing. If he was sent in time outside outside hospital, he would not have died certainly, because they were shouting. Personally, I was involved. I was shouting at the doctor that his actually oxygen level had fallen below 75, which is very dangerous. And still the doctors, I think, acted, but then there were bureaucratic delays, etc. Superintendent and all. It's only third, fourth day when already the court order had come for taking him out. Only in response to that they acted, and as a result, he died.
I mean, I was relieved to find that now the attitude towards menstruation, etc., at least in the jails I was in Maharashtra, Yerwada and Baikala both, they're far more enlightened about these things. They have, they maintain registers of your last period. They actually have the dates noted down, and they supply you with sanitary napkins, of course, the limited amount, and those who require more have to, of course, go and fight for that. But the joke is that the disposal of those sanitary napkins is still a big issue. All of us have to undergo pregnancy tests. You can shout yourself blue in the face that you're 62 and you've entered menopause at the age of 45. It doesn't matter. Myself and Professor Kumar said we all have to undergo pregnancy tests. The thing about pregnancy and childbirth and having small infants with you is, once the jail accepts it, actually the routines fall into place, and at least in these jails which I have mentioned, they are careful about these things. So a pregnant woman will get a certain diet, lactating mothers will get a certain diet, the children are also relatively better taken care of. And the thing I used to feel sad about was that most women there suffered from one kind or another of mental health issues. And the problem was that only those women who would be violent or out of control, or those whom, let's say, you could not get them to follow the routine of the jail, only those women would be treated as psychiatric cases and sent to the psychiatrist. There is the psychiatrist who visits the jail frequently. But the idea of counseling, of therapy, of that, these women have to be rehabilitated. And it's a far, far more difficult task for them to be rehabilitated than men. I think it's something which is really not taken seriously. Rehabilitation is something which is absolutely not taken seriously. Even the opportunities of education. I remember my co-accused, Jyoti, started English classes, and they were so popular. Just simple arithmetic and English. Shomaji and Jyoti used to do that. And unfortunately, COVID came in between, so it all stopped. But, you could possibly give women a way out. But really, I mean, they are heavily understaffed, and whatever staff there is just busy locking you up and putting you in line and keeping you in shape and making sure that there's no lesbian relationships. These are the focus areas. And definitely they're not going to be bothered about your condition of mental health or what will you do when you come out of jail.
दिवलिया जेल की जो स्ट्रेंथ थी 600 पीपल्स के लिए थी, और वहां 2200 बंदी रखे जा रहे थे, तो किस तरह वो रह रहे होंगे, किस तरह खा रहे होंगे, आप सोचिए, बहुत तकलीफदेह मंजर था। और उत्तर प्रदेश गवर्नमेंट हो या केंद्र सरकारी गवर्नमेंट हो या किसी भी राज्य की हो, वो कभी नहीं चेक करती जाकर के जेल में बंदियों को खाना किस तरह दिया जा रहा है, किस तरह वो रह रहे हैं, वो एकदम छुपा रहता है मामला। सरकारी महकमे के लोग तो हर 3 महीने में एक विजिट करते थे, लेकिन किसी की हिम्मत इसलिए नहीं होती थी कि उनके चले जाने के बाद जो जेलर का और सुपरिटेंडेंट का डंडा चलेगा, तो उस डर से कोई बोल नहीं पाता था कि हमारे साथ क्या हो रहा है जेल के अंदर।
As a lawyer, what I would think, which is the situation in prison that I could talk about, is the problem of legal aid. How lawyers, the inmates you don't have any access to proper lawyers, proper legal aid code. That's one way COVID played a positive turn in that sense, is that although COVID was bad for prisoners, there was total neglect of the health, but one thing changed in Maharashtra is that we were allowed to make phone calls to our family. So before coming into Taloja prison, there was a situation where in every barrack there would be many poor and they would have no contact with their family, no contact with lawyers, what is happening in the case, no information at all. But after COVID, they started getting able to call their family, getting news about the cases and all that. That's where you realize that legal aid, if at the present now, it can at least help in giving information to the prisoner, which is a basic right, which he should be getting. Like, what is the next court date? What happened on the last date? What is the situation of my bail application? What is the recording of evidence against me? What is the situation in the High Courts or the Supreme Court in my matters? These things which there's no way that people or prisoners are able to access that. Now, at least the State District Services Authority had started what called the e-kiosks, where you could access the district court's data and all that. And they gave one kiosk to the prison. So the kiosk which was with the prison remained in the prison superintendent's office. So prisoners were not allowed to use it, they had no contact to use it. So prisoners find their own ways, if there would be a video conferencing, what you call facility working out, they would try to get, the guard out there or the inmate out there to search the net and get the next date, to search the net and get the Roznama, which is actually legally not permitted in that sense. But that type of system which a inmate can get access to what is happening in the case, there's no system for that. The problem with legal aid, as I have seen it in Taloja, the district legal services authorities, they are more concerned about organizing central programs. So if at the state level or at the central level, at the Supreme Court level, they have started a campaign, they will implement a certain campaign. So program will be held, meeting will be held, that's all. But consistent providing of lawyers to prisoners is something which is totally absent. So you'll get, I'll give you an example. So the team of lawyers will come for, say the first week of this month. They will take details of your case. The next month, another team of lawyers come. So there is no actually consistent forward. So one point that is important is the question of providing legal information. Second point is, consistent working on cases is totally absent. Do not try to get e-kiosks working in prison, or try to get some system where the inmate can go to this counter, ask for a copy of his Roznama or ask for his date, or get a printout of his High Court bail rejection order or bail passed or things like that.
Initially, there was absolutely, we used to actually crave for communication, and the turn of the telephonic mulaqat used to come after something like on an average 12 days, 14 days, which was supposed to be a week or so. And there was lots of drama about whether it is video call or whether it is simple call. Things were changing and all that kind of. I hear that now it is a bit normalized and people are a bit comfortable with communication at least. But in our times, we really suffered. For days together, we were in dark. So it used to be quite an anxious time that we used to have.
But then eventually when time passes, you just become a prisoner number, you just become a prisoner like anyone else, and you start to grow a new identity within the prison, you start to inhabit what is going on in the prison. And for me it was interesting because these were the things I was reporting whole my life. I was reporting about the prisoners, I was reporting about people who were incarcerated under UAPA or Public Safety Act. Even before going to jail, I was working on a story on UAPA only. And now I was one of them. So as I say that I became the character of my own stories. Now I was living those characters in myself. I was feeling the pain and feeling the suffering that they were going through, and I was feeling it myself. Since I was arrested, I saw my family only once. That was the day when I was booked under Public Safety Act on 15th March 2022, and that's when I saw my parents once only, because I did not want my parents to see me in handcuffs, in police lockup, or behind the bars. So that's why I did not want them to visit me in the prison also. So I did not meet them for 1.5 years while I was in the prison, because I didn't want them to see me in that glass and then having a phone and the iron bars between us, dividing us. So that was my decision to not see my family.
Well, it was definitely more difficult in the single cell in the Fasi yard than it was in the barrack. Because really, when you were locked in at 5:30 until 7:30 the next morning, when you were unlocked, you were just left with yourself and the four walls, and that is a very, very depressing. That's where I wrote all my notes actually for my book. So that's how I use them, because that was my way of making sense of things around me and keep maintaining some sanity. Being a lawyer and knowing that the acts were stringent acts, I had sort of made up my mind that look, I shouldn't even imagine that I would come out very early. So I avoided that roller coaster of hope and despair as my many bail applications were rejected and so on. So I just avoided it. And one very important thing is that having faith on people on the outside. And I was lucky. I had my friends, I had my lawyers, I had my people of my organization, my trade union, and I had full faith in them. And I said, look, I mean, if they can't do it, there's no point my haranguing them and my, trying to exercise my own mind. Let me leave it to them. So if you put that out of the way, which is really a big portion of the anxiety, and I can imagine that those who would not have people on the outside or would not have people that they trusted on the outside, I mean, this must be an overbearing anxiety. Then the other thing is, yes, what do you do with your time and your anxiety about people outside? I think the most difficult thing for me would be to open the letters of my daughter, because she was, my whole purpose in shifting from my place of work, Chhattisgarh, to Delhi was because I wanted to be with her, because I knew she was going through a difficult time and I needed her to pay attention to her studies and all that. And so I was hoping to give her a more secure family life, as it were, while I earned and I tried to support her higher education. But that was not to be. I was arrested, and then there was COVID. She was all alone. So I would have these letters full of anxiety and sadness on her part, and anger, and so many feelings and emotions. And I would know that that letter has been posted many days ago. It has lain in the jail for at least a week before it is censored and it's given to me. And it will be another week before my letter in reply will be sent. So basically there's going to be this long period by which time probably the original problem is going to be. So the entire frustration of communication and this fear of opening that letter and finding that she's very unhappy or what has been happening with her, and how do I console her, how do I convey that I'm thinking about her, that was really very difficult for me. Otherwise, I would say that, jail has a way, it has this clockwork of routine, the bell is ringing, now it's time to, get up, sit in the hotel, now it's time for breakfast, now you to wash your dishes, now it's, time to fill up the water, now, so you are kept busy in that sense. The nights are bad. But then when I went to Baikala, then I became Vakil Aunty, so I had so many applications to write that I was up through most of the night. Anyway, I have a bit of problem with sleep, but in fact, when the staff would come on their rounds, they would say, "Hey Sudha, what are you doing? Go to sleep now." And the lights are on 24 hours. So there's no problem. You can sit through the writing applications in triplicate for COVID bail if you wish. I wrote hundreds of them with very spectacular, failure rate of 100%. So, so I was busy doing that. Yeah, But that was difficult. It was also very difficult, painful to observe other people in jail, mentally ill people who, provoke others and get beaten, or, somebody who's very sick. I think I witnessed at least 2 deaths and several very serious cases. I mean, people being very sick. I remember once a Bangladeshi lady like rolling around in agony, and we are all shouting for the constable to come. And then, fortunately, because I could sort of speak in a little bit of English and give some medical this thing and all that, she turned out to be having a very serious ailment, and finally she was hospitalized and had to be operated and all that. But the first thing is, oh, ye to natak kar rahe hain. And then, okay, let's give them Disprin and let's give them something. And it's only when they feel that something really might happen that they're going to take her to the hospital. So almost every second night there will be something happening. Somebody is falling sick. Somebody has got a bad news. It's a vale of tears, really, to live in. It's painful to observe.
I think Sai wants to add something, and I think we're totally out of time, but I was very keen that we should hear them. Just before Sai begins to speak, when I was hearing these people, you have this whole Nalsa under the Supreme Court and then under different high courts. I really think they should hear these people if they are interested in actually. Arun is giving very specific suggestions. We know that the present Chief Justice of India is deeply invested in using technology. The suggestions made by Arun are all related to technology. And these are things that, if the court wants, they can be done. They can direct the state to put the money, but whether they want it done or not is the question that we are facing. And one thing that came up in the conversation with Sai yesterday, whether it's Sai or many others who are unjustly arrested, prosecuted, and then acquitted. We don't have a law of malicious prosecution in this country. The matter has been raised before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court declined. The Law Commission of India has recommended it. So what becomes the law and what does not become the law is also an act of political wisdom. And I won't speak anymore, so I will share some of his thoughts. But the new laws should be now read in the context of the experiences that have been shared here. And let us revisit those laws and see whether there is any decolonization taking place or the colonial rule is getting more deeply entrenched. Sai, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vrinda ji, for bringing so many voices of the people who suffered, like me, in the prison. In fact, all these people should have been here. I don't understand why the bail conditions are to be such a kind of a thing where you lose your fundamental rights. If a person is out on bail and still fundamental rights, all fundamental rights could be suspended for them, it's a very strange thing for me even today. After Bhima Koregaon case, people came out on bail, but still they can't move out from one particular place. And they can't go even to their own hometowns. And they can't talk to others. But naturally, if a person who is on bail should have been here to share their experiences physically in front of us, it's a very tragic thing, like that they can't come out and talk to the people across anywhere. But it's a wonderful job that we could hear. All these people I knew before, maybe that is a crime now, Again, a new crime it will be if I say this. But I can't talk to them, I can't visit them. I would like to share a few things. I don't take much time now because already, I think, closing time. Very, very fundamental questions that came out from Anand, Sudha, Arun, and the others. See, all of us were in Maharashtra prisons were called Naxal prisoners. And there were about 70 Adivasis in Nagpur Central Prison, and all of them were called Naxal prisoners. And they have made a category called Naxal offense. There is no such category of Naxal prisoner, Naxal offense in the knowledge of law, as far as I know. In fact, there was a judgment by the Mumbai High Court giving directions to the top prison officers that you cannot create a new category and discriminate prisoners based on that category. So you see, like it's a double oppression. Once a person is, branded as a Naxal offender, that means that you can't meet other prisoners. That will they implement. And they'll give you a separate uniform to recognize you immediately that he is an Naxal and he or she is an Naxal. And then you have to sign everywhere. Every time you go to Mulaqat or receive something, you have to sign on 4 registers, separate registers. All other prisoners will sign only on one register. There is a separate register for every act that you do or ask or send a letter or anything. And that is because these registers, they go to different police officers outside. And if you are a Naxal prisoner, you are branded as a Naxal prisoner, you can't be taken to the prison hospital. A separate order has to be passed to take you out of your barrack by the superintendent, and then only you will be taken to the prison hospital. Forget about the hospital outside. So, you are discriminated on every ground, but there is no such category. And we know all about V.R. Krishnaya's judgment that you cannot create categories of prisoners and then treat according to the category. All prisoners should get the same rights, same facilities within the prison. And there are many other judgments, the lawyers here know about this. But none of us challenged it in the court because how many times we go to the court, you can see that if you want a notebook, you have to go to the court. If you want pens, you have to go to court and get. And if you want books, you have to go and get the court. How many things the lawyers can do it? How many times can we do it? If you don't go on to the court, they will not allow you. And even after going to the court and getting the order, they will not implement that. Unless the court once again calls them and tells, it's an offense. And even after that also, after 2-3 months, they will stop you this provision. Then they say you go to court once again. This kind of a thing. And another important thing that I would like to show, caste system. Anand and others talked about caste system, but I would like to say a few words. The moment you enter the prison, the first thing that you are asked is, what is your caste? And they will write it in their register. And then there is no purpose, you are not providing any reservation or any facility based on your caste. Caste, they wanted to know because where you will be placed, in which barrack, and what kind of work you will be given or how you will be treated. They want the caste. And then there is a prison wages and prison work for convicted people and also for under trials, some of the under trials. So they call these prisoners based on their caste. You know, if you say that I am Nai, you will be given barber's work. If you say this caste, you will be given this work, you know. Sewage work, washing toilets, scavenging, you'll get certain castes only. And then if the prison authorities will send a Dalit person to the kitchen, all other upper caste people in the prison will protest that they will not eat. So, I mean, so rampant that the caste system is, you know. And then these people who have to clean these toilets and the drainage system and all that, they have to do with their bare hands. They don't provide any gloves, no instruments, nothing. And, the food has to be carried to the barracks. Yes, please. Let me. The caste system, everywhere it is works. The Manu rules there, and he sits in the center of the prison. And let me tell you, this is in the prison manual of Maharashtra. And the prison manual of Maharashtra is part of the Prisons Act, 1894 Amended Act. And it is in the statute book under the Constitution. The caste system is recognized and the work is allotted according to the caste. And then another thing that I would like to tell you to this, which I really suffered and even cried, is a torture. Torture, you can see, you can't tolerate the kind of torture that you see. In front of your eyes it happens. You are helpless, you can't stop it. You have to see that kind of a torture that the moment a prisoner enters in any of the Maharashtra prisons, at the main gate itself, after being asked as of the caste, he will be taken aside and will be beaten up. Excepting a few people. If there is a Naxal prisoner, as they call it, they will not beat. And if there is a white collar offense, they don't. But all others are beaten up. They will not ask you anything except caste, and then they will take you aside. There is a designated place between the two main gates before you enter inside the jail. They will beat you like anything. Some bones will have to break, some injuries have to be made. Why? I did not understand for the first few months, why should they beat people like this? And most of these people, the majority of the people are petty offenses, come out on petty offenses, they come. That is to terrorize the people, to see, discipline the people. One officer said that tomorrow they will create problems. The first day they should taste what the jail is. And this is a common practice. And after that, there are quarrels among the prisoners to get the place. The space is not there. In the sense, like it's overcrowded. The Nagpur Central Prison is meant for 1,500 people now. And the British made it was for 1,800 people, 800 people. Now it's for 1,500 people, but there are 3,200 people out there. And there is hardly any time. Yes. And then they quarrel for the space. There is no space to sit, and there is no space, of course, to sleep. There is no water. For everything, they have to fight like dogs. And using this fighting, they punish them. The two groups of fought, the two people fought, and then they punish. Punishment at every level is the only way to discipline the prisoners for them. I will not go into this more details, except that, one thing that I wanted to say finally is that, there are, in all Maharashtra prisons, medical treatment is abysmal. They appoint doctors who are, diploma holders in Ayurvedic, but they practice in allopathy. And there is an order by Maharashtra government to allow this. Correct. And that's why the highest number of people who die in prisons is from Maharashtra. Anybody can die at any time. That is the kind of situation. There are many other things, but there's no time now more to, we have to close it. Tell us about the Anda cell. It will take time.
No, sir, take 5 months or 10 minutes. As much time as you want. Within limits. We have a time limit. Mm-hmm. So please go ahead with don't act on behalf of organizers.
Sorry, I think maybe we can break and discuss about it and ourselves. Okay.
I think ये ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि जवाहर भवन में जो लोग हैं उनके काम करने का भी एक वक्त है. हमें जो बात करनी है हम बाहर कर सकते हैं. कृपया इसका ध्यान रखें, प्लीज.
It's a kind of, a mysterious place, I would say. Andasal is constructed in such a way that, at one point a guard can stand and observe all the cells. Andasal is not one cell. It has 24 cells in a kind of anda shape, and then one single guard can stand at one place and can observe. But none of the prisoners can see the guard or any other prisoner within the undercell. That is the kind of undercell that you have. And you can't get fresh air because it's closed from all over. But you will get the rain on your head. And the sun. It's why, unless you go and stay there, you cannot understand this undercell. It's a mysterious place. The full sun is there, but you don't get fresh air because air will not come, because the top, high walls are there, and then it's left open. The sun comes, rain comes, but no air comes. And there are many things that one can say about it, but one thing, last word I can say, that it's very difficult to stay in undercell with the sanity maintained of a person for more than 1 year. But I stayed there for more than 8.5 years. Now you can judge whether I am still sane or not. But, there are people and there are rules also. The prison authorities cannot keep people in undercell for a prolonged period of time. But I was the only person in the history of the undercell of Nagpur prison to be kept for such a long time. There is no other person in history. It's very, very difficult to maintain your sanity because, people who spend more than 1 year, they turn violent because you always have to see the walls, nothing else, and the rods. Okay, I conclude. Perhaps the organizers will, I will leave it to Apurvanand and Kavita to say the concluding things, and then as I am very glad that these voices have come out here, and the political incarceration, I think we will continue to see. It's not going to end as very soon, but it's very important to make it a kind of an agenda for all of us to raise this issue consistently and see, at least there should be a law in this country to recognize political prisoners as political prisoners. I'm not talking about all the activists should be only the people who should be considered as political prisoners, but for any political reason or social reason, if they are incarcerated, they should not be incarcerated. Nobody should be incarcerated. If they happen to be incarcerated, there should be a provision for recognizing these people as political prisoners, so that there is a kind of a space where political prisoners or those who are prospective political prisoners have a kind of idea that what's going to happen to them. Thank you very much.
So the idea was not to, it is grim, we know that, but the idea is not for us to lower our spirits. The idea is to be even more resolute and determined, and listen to the reality, make that reality more public, so that what is hidden behind the high walls is now there. Vernon Gonsalves has written about the health system at length in a medical journal. Many others are actually writing. I think Anand Teltumbre's book is also in the making. And I think it's very important what Sai and others are sharing with us. It's interesting that actually jail manuals fall under state governments. It's an area that every government neglects because you don't think you are going to be the one in there. There are now complaints being made by those who have, chief ministers, deputy chief minister, and others who are in Tihar jail from Delhi. And there are aspects of the jail manual that were never looked into. So perhaps it's time for all state governments also to look at it, maybe for their own interests. I'm not expecting anything more than self-interest from a politician, so I'm very pragmatic. I will only end with a very beautiful poem of Gulfisha Fatima, who is still in jail, as are many other very young, spirited leaders, from Umar Khalid to Miran Haider to Sharjeel, Khalid Saifi, and maybe I'm forgetting some names, so please excuse me for that. I just want to end with Gulfisha's poem, which was shared with all of us recently, where she is speaking to Faiz and reminding Faiz of a poem that he wrote. सुनो फैज़, क्या तुम्हें पता है, तुम्हारे और हमारे इंतज़ार का फ़र्क है महज़. वक्त मोयन, I don't even know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. फ़कत चंद रोज़ और ये जानते थे तुम, दस्ते सबा की तरह बेज़ुबां अब्र नहीं बताता कुछ. जब मैं पूछती हूँ ऐसे कितने मौसम और, जाने कितने मौसम और. As I said, at least in my understanding, the answer to Gulfisha is in the hands of the court. We can keep screaming at the regime, but maybe we need to ask more pointed questions of the court. The Bhima Koregaon people can't come to Bombay because that's a condition of their bail. 2018 to 2024, the trial, the charge has yet to be framed. This is within the cognizance of the highest court of the land. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया. वृंदा, साईं बाबा, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. हम जानते हैं कि आप सब कुछ बातचीत ज़रूर करना चाहते होंगे, लेकिन हमारे पास अब वक्त नहीं है। आज इतवार का दिन है और जवाहर भवन के हमारे जितने भी दोस्त इस सभा के लिए आए हैं, ये हम उनका ज़्यादा वक्त ले रहे हैं, इसलिए मैं माफ़ी चाहता हूँ कि हम सवाल जवाब नहीं कर पाएंगे। अब मैं दावत देना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि ये नीलाभ मिश्रा का जन्मदिन है और बिना रिटर्न गिफ्ट के कोई यहाँ से जाता नहीं है, सारे लोग नहीं जो मंच पर हैं। तो कविता, पूर्वा भारद्वाज, भवन मेघवंशी, अनूप सराया और
साथियों 2 मिनट रुक जाइए।
2 मिनट रुक
2
जाइए,
मिनट की बात
या
है।
फिर जन्मदिन है जी।
हमारे स्पीकर्स को धन्यवाद। सिर्फ 2 मिनट। तो मैं सबसे पहले पूर्वा जी को आमंत्रित करूंगी कि वो साय को सम्मानित करें। बहुत ही छोटा टोकन, जोरदार तालियों से देखें, ताली बहुत कम बजी है। भंवर जी आइए वृंदा को, और मैं चाहूँगी कि वसंता और मंजीरा भी मंच पे आएँ। आप दोनों प्लीज़ आइए मंच पे। ये बहुत ज़रूरी है कि माने वो सारे दुख दर्द खुशी में सब शामिल रहे हैं। प्लीज़ आइए मंजीरा जी। और मैं आमंत्रित करूँगी देवयानी और अनूप सराया जी को। देवयानी, आप वसंता, प्लीज़ कम इन द सेंटर। प्लीज़ कम इन द सेंटर। प्लीज़ खोलना पड़ेगा। अब पूर्वानंद, आप धन्यवाद देंगे। आइए, माफ़ कीजिएगा, पूर्वानंद मास्टर जी भी हैं, देखिए हेड मास्टर जी।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप सबका। जवाहर भवन के हमारे दोस्तों का, ख़ास करके आज इतवार के दिन वे आए, उन्होंने सारा इंतज़ाम किया जिससे यह व्याख्यान हो पाए। आप सबका एक बार बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।